Today, I'm ranking all of the occupations in Build 42 for Project Zomboid. We'll be using a tier list structure, that's S tier all the way down to F tier for those that are unfamiliar, and of course, if you find yourself disagreeing with one of my choices, you can tell me why I'm wrong down in the comments. Let's go ahead and get started, kicking things off with the Fire Officer. So we're starting with a timeless classic, a solid, well-rounded pick for newcomers, especially thanks to its bonus to both strength and fitness skills. This is going to mean you can fight for longer periods without tiring, carry more loot, and knock back zombies a little further with each of your attacks. The axe skill is a nice bonus here too, especially if you're able to get your hands on the firefighter's signature fire axe. Sure, the fire officer doesn't exactly excel in any one skill, and it doesn't cover any crafting skills either, but at a low point cost that leaves you with a neutral 0 points, you'd be picking an all-rounder with some helpful combat-centric benefits and no real downsides. For that reason, it's going into the A tier. Okay, so next up is the Police Officer, and if this was Build 41, it would probably be pretty high up in the rankings, but since firearms are even harder to make good use of in Build 42, that is going to affect this occupation's rating in today's video. Now, it's not an entirely useless class thanks to the extra point into Nimble that it gives you, which will allow you to move faster while backpedaling in combat, and firearms do have their place as you start to gain levels, of course. So if you're looking to get a head start at becoming a post-apocalypse gunslinger, this is probably the choice for you. But overall, it just feels like there are better choices when you take into account the fairly hefty cost of -4 trait points. Like I say, probably would have been higher in Build 41, and maybe it'll be higher again if firearms are balanced a little bit more before Build 42 hits the stable branch, but for right now, it's getting a C from me. Okay, so the Park Ranger is next, and I think this is a real contender for top spot in Build 42 right now. Yes, it comes at the same cost as the Police Officer, that's -4 trait points. It is a little costly, but the payoff is massive. Not only do you get an extra point in the axe skill for combat purposes, you'll also get extra levels in some of the most useful survival skills currently in the game. The point in Carpentry gets you closer to building your own safe house much faster, but the real prize is the 2 levels you'll get in both foraging and trapping. In Build 42, both of these skills are incredibly powerful. Trapping allows you to not only catch animals for meat like you could in the previous version of the game, but now you can also take those animals home, build them an enclosure, and you've got a reliable source of food for the months to come if you play your cards right. Oh, and on top of that, you'll have all of the crafting recipes for traps too, so you can just focus on building the best ones right away. Foraging is perhaps one of the most slept on skills in Project Zomboid as a whole, giving you access to a bunch of items that you might expect, like food, herbs, and firewood, but also some stuff that you might not expect, like propane tanks, clothing items, and even the fabled rare katana. So getting 2 levels of that is also incredibly useful here. If all that wasn't enough, the Park Ranger finally also gets a bunch of bonuses to foraging finds, especially food items, a larger vision radius while foraging, and a reduction to the effects that weather will have on your foraging experience. Not a single point is wasted on this occupation choice, so it's going to be today's first S tier rating. Now, if you're wondering how we've managed to get all this extended information about each occupation so far, this is down to a mod called Detailed Descriptions for Occupations and Traits. This tells you all of the recipes you'll learn from each occupation, and some of the foraging bonuses that they'll get too, which the vanilla game doesn't even tell you about right now. It's a fantastic mod for new players, especially since it doesn't change the game in any way, and if you're looking for more mod recommendations like these, we did a video taking a look at a bunch of them back in October that's probably worth a watch. Now, moving down the list, we've got the Construction Worker next. I do like this one, and I think it's a very solid choice for a couple of reasons. The class comes with a level in Carpentry, and more importantly, a level in Maintenance, which will make your weapons last longer. Really helpful in the early stages, especially when you're grabbing whatever you can find. It does also come with 2 levels in Masonry, and although that's not exactly terrible, it doesn't really have a huge benefit right now. Especially if you're just playing a standard run, fun because the chances are you're not going to need to build an entire house from scratch. There's no valuable looting foraging bonuses for this class either, but it is very cheap at -2 points. The construction worker's saving grace above all else though is 3 levels in short blunt weapons, which can encompass a whole lot of the weapons that you're likely to find in those first couple of weeks, all the way from rolling pins or mallets to nightsticks and hammers. So not only are you going to be able to use a lot of common weaponry with much higher efficiency, they'll also last longer thanks to the maintenance bonus. For the low cost it takes to gain these bonuses, this occupation gets a place in the B tier. Alright, so we go on to the security guard now. At times a bit of a double-edged sword with this one. It's fairly inexpensive at -2 points and comes with the trait Night Owl, which means you don't need as much sleep, take less time to fall asleep, you stay extra alert while sleeping, so you'll essentially wake up sooner if a zombie is nearby. And lastly, you'll have increased fatigue recovery while sleeping. Now the positives are pretty obvious here. Less time sleeping means more time doing other useful stuff like reading or fortifying a safe house, but I'll be honest, I often get overconfident and end up going out looting at night only to get myself into dangerous situations because of the low light conditions. Come to think of it, that probably says more about me than the occupation itself, but anyway, you get a couple of levels in running, 1 level in light-footed, and some very slight adjustments to foraging, but none of these are really that amazing. It's all about that extra time you'll get from needing less sleep at a fairly low cost. So placing 1 below the construction worker, it's going to be the B tier for this one. Alright, so earlier I mentioned there was a better all-round pick than the construction worker, and it's time that we get to that one now. The carpenter occupation leaves you with 1 trait point still to spend, and as of build 42, now comes with the previous 3 levels in carpentry, but also 1 level in carving, maintenance, masonry, and short blunt. I would argue that 1 point in carving gets you access to any of the tools that you'd want to craft for any of the other skill trees. You still get the increased durability of your weapons that the construction worker has, and on top of that, you get access to all of these makeshift weapon crafting recipes and a 30% increased chance to find firewood while foraging. You're losing 2 levels in short blunt, but you'll get that back over time anyway, and 1 level in masonry, but again, it's cheaper, and I don't think anyone is really using that masonry right now anyway. All to say, carpenter is an outright better choice than the construction worker, so it's getting an A. So we're on to an all-time favorite pick for a lot of players with the burglar occupation next, and I think I'm going to catch a bit of flack on this one because my opinion might be a little bit unpopular. Now, the burglar comes with a bunch of relatively small bonuses that, while they are good, don't really stand out, such as 2 levels in nimble, sneaking, and light-footed. They also have less chance to break window locks and faster rope climbing speed. Of course, all of this is secondary to the main selling point, which is the ability to hotwire vehicles from game start. Bit of a hot take from me maybe, but I actually don't see this occupation as the amazing choice that so many players think it is, and I'll explain why. Yes, the burglar allows you to hotwire a vehicle of your choosing, but honestly, I don't tend to have any trouble finding usable vehicles in build 42, at least with the default Apocalypse sandbox settings. Burglar occupation excels in those very particular setups where vehicles are fewer and farther between, but otherwise, all you're really doing is hurrying things along. Even with the more minor benefits offered by these skill bumps, for the frankly massive 6-point deficit that this occupation puts you in, it's my humble opinion that there are better decisions to be made, and for that reason, I'm placing this one in the C tier. Now, we're looking at the chef occupation as our next one, and while this is one that I love as an option for wilderness survival setups thanks to its often overlooked food-focused foraging bonuses, sadly, that's not the standard situation that most players will be in, and the other benefits don't really tend to stack up against other occupations that come at the same 4-point cost. With 3 points in the cooking skill, this occupation is able to make food stretch further by getting higher nutritional values from a smaller amount of ingredients when adding food to recipes. To be specific here, the 3 levels that you get will mean you'd use 9% less food and gain the same 9% bonus to nutritional values. They also add those ingredients an absolutely minute 0.15 seconds faster than a level 0 cook would. Having a chef in a group of survivors is great considering they'll have a lot of cooking recipes already available to them when they spawn in that other players have to spend time looking for. But even with the extra level in maintenance, butchering, and the short blade skill, I don't think this one really stands out as a superior occupation. After all, cooking in the apocalypse is a luxury, and at the end of the day, making basic food combinations with happiness and boredom bonuses can be done with zero cooking skill, and otherwise we can always eat straight from the can. As much as I have a soft spot for cooking in Project Zomboid, this one is getting a D. Now, it makes sense for me to jump forward a bit here and look at the burger flipper occupation next, because it has a lot of similarities with the chef. We keep those levels in maintenance and short blade, but we lose the level in butchering and a level in the cooking skill too, leaving the burger flipper with only 2 levels in that skill. Now, that might seem like a downgrade, but honestly, there are much better things to distribute points into than the cooking skill in my opinion, and crucially, this occupation leaves you with 2 points to spend as opposed to the chef, leaving you 4 points in the red. This means we've got some more points to work with for traits that will actively help our survival efforts. And on top of that, the burger flipper has increased chances to find junk food when foraging, which can be incredibly useful for keeping your calories topped up and to prevent you from losing weight, a common problem in Build 42. You'll also have the same keen cook trait that provides you with a range of cooking recipes, so in my mind, it's really just a slightly better version of the chef that leaves you with a few more options. I'm giving the burger flipper a C for that reason. Next up is the DIY expert, coming in at the same 4-point cost as the chef, but with some much better payoffs for that price. Similar to the construction worker, this choice benefits from a level in carpentry to help you get your base building ventures off the ground. And it comes with 2 levels in the maintenance skill too, making it significantly easier to get the most out of your weaponry. But you also only get 1 level in the short blunt skill, as opposed to the construction worker's 3 levels. The extra level in both carving and masonry might later have more uses in Build 42, but right now I just don't really think it's worth the higher point cost, even with the various crafted weapon recipes available to this class. The most notable of these recipes is really the ability to craft a screwdriver, which I know is one of those things that can drive survivors insane while they try to find one. So it's not a bad choice, but I do think construction worker is just slightly better, and as a result, the DIY expert finds itself with a B ranking. Okay, so we're on to Livestock Farmer now, and this is one that was added in Build 42, so with it being a new occupation, you'd probably expect it to be fairly good, right? Well, it's certainly not terrible, but it's not really that great either. For a 2-point deficit, you'll be granted 3 levels in both animal care and butchering, as well as 1 level in agriculture. Now, animal care and butchering are new to this update as well, so I'll explain what these levels do for the player. The higher your animal care skill, the more resources you'll obtain from harvesting products, such as milk from cows or wool from sheep. It also reduces the chances that they'll become stressed during these actions. Butchering is relatively simple, and each level you have in the skill simply results in higher quality meat from a carcass, thus feeding you for longer periods. The bonus level in agriculture has a few effects on plants that you're growing, but they're all very, very small and essentially just reduce the chance that the crops will be affected by various diseases. With how long it now takes to grow crops in Project Zomboid as of Build 42, you'd have to be around for months of in-game time before this became useful. As for animal care and butchering, yes, those skills are useful, but again, you can find plenty of food without butchering animals or keeping livestock right now, at least for the first few weeks. This is a great choice for long-term playthroughs, but despite its low cost, so many players won't make it to this late game stage, and with that in mind, I'm giving this occupation a C. Now, sticking with farming, we're looking at the crop farmer next, and this one actually leaves you with an extra 2 points to spend, unlike many of the other occupations in the game right now. You'll also get 3 levels in the agriculture skill, which crucially will mean that you are able to identify any disease a crop has contracted, otherwise not available until that 3rd level in agriculture. Now, if this were Build 41, I'd be placing this occupation at least in the upper half of our rankings today, because farming farming was much more useful thanks to quicker growing times. Now, however, farming takes so long that I don't even think it's really worth it anymore. There are so many better options for acquiring food on short notice, like foraging, trapping, hunting, or fishing. The only reason I really ever consider taking this occupation would be for the slightly increased foraging vision radius and the higher percentage chance to find crops, animals, fruits, and vegetables. And even then, I don't really think these bonuses make it a worthwhile decision. This is the first occupation in today's video that will thus find itself all the way down in the E tier. It's a real shame, honestly, because if farming worked ever so slightly differently, I'd be putting this one maybe a C or a B, but as it stands, it's just not a good choice to make. So I just mentioned how there are a lot of better options for food gathering, and one of them was fishing, which our next occupation, the angler, is particularly good at. For a relatively small 2-point cost, you'll gain 3 levels in fishing and 1 level in foraging, with some extra foraging bonuses like a 50% increase to finding insects, making fishing inherently easier since these can be used as bait items, and a wider foraging vision radius. On top of all that, you'll get all the necessary fishing recipes to get yourself out there, like fishing rods and nets. Now, it is important for me to mention that while this occupation does come with a handful of positives, it's also focused towards one singular skill, and even with 3 levels in fishing, you'll probably find in build 42 that you're still going to be catching relatively small fish more often than not with this skill level. Even with the good results from your lakeside ventures, you could just wander down to your local grocery store and stock your freezer for at least a couple of weeks. Certainly not a bad choice, but I'd still much rather invest it in an occupation that gets me some combat bonuses with certain weapons, maybe something towards my crafting goals, something with a slightly wider net being cast, if you'll excuse the fishing pun. This one is getting a C ranking from me. Not terrible, but not great either. The Doctor is up next, and I'm pretty sure that almost everyone watching this will already know that this occupation will not be getting a good score, but let's at least explain why. Now, the largest downfall of the Doctor occupation is also, unfortunately, its single largest focus. This choice gains 3 levels in the first aid skill, which is widely agreed within the Project Zomboid community as a predominantly useless skill. It's not that this skill isn't good at fixing up wounds or helping you recover from injuries faster, it's that Project Zomboid is fundamentally directed towards conditioning the player to avoid these wounds. By the time anyone has played even a few hours of Project Zomboid, we know to avoid things like climbing through broken windows or falling from a great height, both good examples of how you could acquire a wound that's worth having the first aid skill for. The most common injuries, after all, come from zombies. If that's in the form of a scratch or laceration, you'll heal up fairly quickly, and if it's a bite, well, you don't need to worry about recovery. On top of that, if you really want to, you can just level first aid ridiculously fast by stepping on broken glass and then simply rebandaging the wound over and over each time you heal. The only thing remotely useful from this occupation is the extra level in the short blade skill, and really I'd rather have something like short blunt skill, but I suppose that's personal preference. Even though this occupation leaves you with 2 points to spend, unless we see fundamental change to Zomboid's medical system, it's going to remain at the bottom of the table, and it is getting an E rank from me. I very quickly just want to jump straight to the nurse occupation next, because it's essentially the same as the doctor, but somehow worse. It leaves you with 2 points to spend, the same as the doctor, but removes a level in the first aid skill, leaving you with 2 levels total, and replaces the level in short blade with a level in light-footed, something that's going to reduce the sound of your footsteps by 10%. As you can probably imagine, that's an incredibly small amount in the grand scale of things, and will make almost no impact on your playthrough at all. Unless you're taking the light-footed skill to some high levels, it's really not worth having. We've essentially removed the only useful thing that the doctor occupation had, so I'm sorry, nurse fans, this is going to be our very first entry in the F tier, right down at the bottom of our table. The Veteran, an absolute classic in the Zomboid community, and perhaps one of the most popular choices for players looking to make good use of firearms in build 41. With this version of the game though, firearms are considerably harder to use, as we covered earlier. You might think that makes the veteran a good choice, considering it's giving you 2 levels in aiming and reloading, but it comes at a massive cost, putting you 8 points into the red. It's worth remembering here that the police officer gets an extra level in aiming and a level in nimble at half the cost. The simple reason why the veteran is so expensive is because they gain the desensitized trait, meaning they are physically incapable of being panicked unless it's through a nightmare. And this makes weapons, both firearms and melee, easier to use in situations where there are large amounts of zombies. Really though, I'd always choose the police officer over the veteran, simply because, in my mind, you get more value for the price you pay. Firearms aren't really as effective as they used to be at lower levels, and if you're expecting to go in guns blazing, you've probably got time to slam back a beta blocker and preemptively reduce those panic levels anyway. The veteran does get a couple of nice bonuses for foraging and the ability to craft a chest rig from tarp, but overall I still think the police officer is the superior choice if you absolutely want to move into using firearms, and for that reason the veteran is getting a D. Okay, so this brings me to the Lumberjack, and this is just a fantastic option that often gets overlooked. It comes with 2 levels in axe-based weapons, famously some of the best available in Project Zomboid, 1 level in maintenance to help them last longer, and is one of only 2 occupations next to the firefighter to gain a level in strength, directly increasing how much you can carry, how much damage you deal, and how likely you are to make a zombie fall over when pushing them. Now, I already think this one is slightly better than the firefighter, purely based on the shuffle of where those skill levels are distributed. It would be a close call, but then the Lumberjack takes things to a whole new level by applying the Expert trait. This gives you a flat 25% increased swing speed with axes and a huge 50% damage bonus when using axes as well. In build 42, this trait is further improved because it also results in a reduction of muscle strain buildup when chopping down trees, which is handy if you're building an extension for your safe house or looking to fuel that antique stove for the winter. As if all that wasn't enough, it also comes with 66% faster movement when walking through trees and some fairly good foraging bonuses too. Shockingly, this all comes at the same cost as the firefighter, leaving you at a neutral 0 points. I don't think I really need to say any more about this one. It's just a fantastic combat-focused occupation right now, and it is going in the S tier right next to the park ranger. Okay, the fitness instructor is up next with a couple of decent benefits available, namely the 3 levels in fitness the class is known for. This essentially serves to reduce the rate at which you'll build fatigue, slow how often you become tired from exertion, and apply small bonuses to attack speed, trip reduction, and successful climbing chances. It's a very useful skill to have some extra levels in alongside the extra 2 levels in the running skill you'll get, but it comes at a hefty -6 points. A large part of that point cost is the inclusion of the nutritionist trait, usually available at 4 points if you don't choose the fitness instructor as your occupation. This essentially allows you to see the full nutritional values of any food item, which sounds incredibly useful at first for a version of the game that currently requires you to consume a lot of food to keep a steady weight for your character. The only real trouble is that all packaged food items will already tell you their nutritional values, and to be honest, all that really matters is the calorie count. Slam on the calories to put on weight and eat low calorie foods if you need to lose it. It really is that simple for the most part, which makes this trait somewhat useless once you understand how weight gain actually works in Project Zomboid. Moreover, the more familiar you are with the game, the more you'll learn which foods to eat and when as part of your innate knowledge, further devaluing this trait. For the high point cost this occupation comes at, I just don't think it's worthwhile, as good as those fitness bonuses can be. It's going to be the D tier for this one. Now, we've only got a few left to cover, and the next 2 occupations we're looking at in today's video are going to be compared side by side because they affect much of the same stuff. So we've got the electrician and the engineer. First things first, they both come at the same cost of -4 trait points, and both are able to operate generators, which otherwise needs to be learned via a magazine or by acquiring 3 levels in electrical. This is a massive selling point for both of these occupations. The electrician has 3 levels in electrical, whereas the engineer instead has 1 level in electrical, carpentry, and masonry. This is, in my opinion, the defining feature of what makes the engineer significantly more flexible than the electrician. Because both occupations can already operate generators, there's really only one reason you'd like to have the electrical skill that the electrician provides, and that's because with each level you can repair your generators more effectively with each piece of scrap that you use to do so. Aside from that, the crafting recipes you need the electrical skill for are largely useless. I don't think I've seen anyone really utilize motion sensors, and why go to the effort of crafting a radio when they are so easily found? The engineer, however, has a much more varied approach, helping towards base building efforts, and instead of recipes like crafted radios, he instead knows how to make explosives, firebombs, and firecrackers. These are incredibly overlooked pieces of equipment in Project Zomboid and can be a very easy way to clean up large hordes of zombies in busy areas, or just draw them away so you can get valuable loot locations secured. What's more, they retain the only remotely useful electrical recipes, that being improvised flashlights and lighters. Without a doubt, the engineer is vastly superior in this matchup, and as such, the electrician goes down to the E tier, and the engineer is going all the way up in the A tier. Seriously, the engineer is, in my opinion, a severely underrated and underutilized occupation and deserves a lot more use, so give it a try if you haven't before. We're whittling down the list, but we now have the Welder, specialized towards repairing car parts, building metal furniture items, and barricading a safe house with the same. Now let's get this out of the way early. There is a big 6-point cost behind this occupation, and the main benefits from that are 3 levels in the welding skill, as well as some pre-learned recipes that can be utilized to improve a safe house, like metal walls, metal containers for increased storage, and additional armor recipes for crafting scrap-based protection. With absolutely no offensive or survival-based benefits, you're sinking everything into a single area of crafting here, and I do have to be honest, it's stuff you can probably do without. Sure, building metal walls is technically better than wooden ones, but the supplies are much harder to come across, and there's no real need to have the increased HP that these constructions offer, because ultimately you're never going to have a horde attacking your base in the current state of the game. If there were wandering hordes, I could see this occupation being a lot more valuable, but until then, it's really quite weak and definitely doesn't warrant the 6-point deficit that you'll be placed in. This one is thus going in the F tier. Now, another brand new occupation to Build 42 is the Blacksmith, and as you'd expect, they are granted a hefty bonus to the blacksmithing skill, 4 levels to be precise. They're also given 1 level in the maintenance skill. These bonuses come at a 6-point cost, similar to the Welder that we just looked at. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat my thoughts here. In a standard playthrough, I think this could genuinely be one of the worst occupations in Project Zomboid. This was clearly added to target very, very long-term play where most lootable items are no longer available and you're several years down the line. Unless you're in that very specific circumstance, there's no real reason to go through the drawn out and long-winded crafting process to make your own weapons using a forge. Yes, these weapons can be quite powerful, but we're talking hours of investment finding the necessary supplies only to craft an item that equals some of the higher end weaponry we can find out and about when looting locations like fire stations, survival stores, or even just pulling them from zombie corpses. The maintenance point is useful, but there are many better choices if that's all you're after, so until we get into multiplayer situations or see some more support for long-term playthroughs, this is going to stay at the bottom of the table with an F ranking from me. Okay, so we've finally got another occupation that I can definitely support, and that's the mechanic. You'll get 3 levels in the mechanic skill and a level in the short blunt skill, making it the first occupation to benefit from some form of offensive bonus that we've looked at in a little while. As I mentioned earlier in this video, short blunt as a skill is a great one because so many weapons fall under this category that you'll find in the early to mid game of Project Zomboid. For a total of a 4-point cost, the mechanic also gains a bonus trait, allowing them knowledge of how to repair each vehicle type. therefore skipping the need to find 3 separate magazines. Your vehicle is an imperative part of any survival experience in Project Zomboid. I'd probably be ranking this one slightly higher in a multiplayer environment because a well-trained mechanic is even more useful there, but even playing solo, it can be a huge benefit to be able to repair or replace various parts of your vehicle. Replacing windshields so zombies can't reach in and take a chunk out of you, repairing the hood to keep your engine intact, and perhaps most crucially of all, the higher your mechanic skill, the more engine parts you'll obtain when scrapping them, allowing you to keep your trusty steed running for much longer. For anyone surviving more than a couple of weeks, this occupation is fantastic, but it does suffer from a relatively low offensive bonus and tunneling itself into one area of crafting. It is a solid one, but it's not quite top tier, and as such, it's going in the B rank. Okay, so we've finally reached the last occupation in this video, and that is the Tailor. This one is relatively simple because all it does is give you 4 levels in tailoring and a whole bunch of tailoring recipes. The amount of recipes granted went up massively in build 42, and there are definitely some useful items in here, especially for those living in a wilderness setting. That said, right now at least, that's not going to be many people unless we someday see a specific game mode tailored to this playstyle. Very hard on that one, please laugh. Despite having all of these recipes, most players are simply going to bash in a few skulls and find these items within the first few days in a standard setting. The 4 levels in tailoring itself, however, can prove to be very beneficial for extra protection when fighting zombies, and can definitely save your life in some situations. The higher level you're tailoring, the more protection a patch is going to provide. At level 4, these are the added protection values you can expect for each type of patch. Leveling your tailoring will be a whole lot easier thanks to 166% XP gain that this occupation starts with, and as such, these protection values can go even higher pretty quickly. The Tailor is even left with 2 points left to spend, and as such, I'm giving this one a respectable ranking even though it has no offensive benefits, simply because it can save your life if you use the tailoring skill correctly. It is a B rank for this one. So that is every single occupation from Project Zomboid, and as such, that is it from me in this video. But I'd definitely be interested to hear what you thought about my rankings and if you've made any changes to them yourself. This was our first tier list video on the channel, and I definitely think I'm going to do some more, maybe on popular safe house locations or weapons, so stay tuned for those. For now, I'd like to say thank you to all of my wonderful Patreon supporters for backing the channel for as little as £3 a month, and for joining us on our whitelisted multiplayer server. Thanks everyone, and I will see you all in the next one.